You should have stayed quiet, Evelyn. People like you never win. That's what Sheriff Rowan told her right before the fire, before the truth clawed its way out of the frozen ground in Caldwell Hollow. Some say she burned everything down to find peace. Others say the earth itself opened to tell her story. Either way, nothing in that quiet town would ever be buried again. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Morning settled quietly around the cabin. Evelyn Hart moved through the kitchen with the kind of rhythm that came from doing the same things for years, cracking 2 eggs, toasting bread, nudging the old coffee pot until it decided to work. Sam shuffled in, hair sticking up, dragging his blanket. "Is it school day, Mom?" "Every day feels like it," she said, handing him toast. He ate without a word, swinging his legs against the chair. Lobo barked twice, sharp and distant, like he'd found a squirrel or something less friendly. The radio crackled on the counter, a steady voice mentioning rain and next week's meeting about land conservation. Evelyn half listened, poured coffee into her chipped mug, and watched fog slide over the ridge. When Sam left for school, she began tidying the small house. David's old work jacket still hung by the door, the sleeve burned stiff from years ago. She brushed off the dust fingers, pausing longer than she meant. At breakfast, Sam had asked, "Do you still dream about Dad?" She'd smiled faintly. Not much anymore. It wasn't true, but some things stayed folded away, like that jacket. Outside, the porch groaned under her steps. Lobo stretched beside her as she checked the broken radio. "Anything broken can be fixed," she murmured, "if someone's willing to open it up." The thought stuck with her. Folding chairs lined the town hall, filled with neighbors avoiding her eyes. Evelyn sat near the back, clutching a worn folder. At the front, Sheriff Kent Rowan stood beside a table of maps, his voice calm and practiced. He spoke about new conservation zones, minor adjustments to protect the forest. Evelyn waited, knowing her property sat right on that border. Her turn would come soon, and the folder in her lap suddenly felt heavier than before. "We've completed a new environmental assessment," he began, "and the state has asked that certain areas near the forest perimeter be adjusted to meet updated conservation guidelines." He paused, scanning the crowd. Evelyn heard someone clear their throat. A baby squeaked in the distance. "That means Rowan continued homes that sit inside the updated protected zone will need to be evaluated for compliance. Some structures may be subject to relocation." The word hung heavy. Someone asked about compensation. Someone else mumbled something about fairness. Evelyn stood, her voice louder than she intended. "My family's house isn't new. It was built before most of these zoning lines ever existed. My parents bought that land outright in 1962. Rowan turned slowly toward her. He didn't look surprised. "I remember," he said. "And I also remember the fire, the one tied to David Hart's violations at the mill. I don't think we want to open that file again, do we?" It was a clean slap. She didn't speak. The word fire had done its job. Whispers moved faster now. A man near the door shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed. Behind her, a woman whispered just loud enough, "She ought to be careful what she digs up." No one stepped in. No one said her name with kindness. The meeting stretched on. Evelyn stayed seated, folder limp in her hands. Words blurred: eminent domain, relocation, public safety. When it ended, people drifted toward the doors, trading polite nods. She passed them without stopping, stepped into the drizzle, and walked toward the school. Sam waited near the entrance, jacket, zipped hair wet. His backpack slipped off one shoulder. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, fixing the strap. "Are they going to make us move? We'll talk at home, okay?" He nodded, quiet. They walked past the town bulletin board. Old notices peeled at the corners, layered over new ones. Mineral rights review, landslide risk, groundwater restoration. No one ever cleared the old before adding the next. Evelyn stood a moment reading, then kept walking. Sam hummed softly in the truck, tracing shapes on the fog glass. The road jolted near the old mill. She pulled over, checked beneath the wheel. Across the ditch, Sam pointed toward the trees. "That spot near our porch looks kind of like this." She followed his gesture, but said nothing. The ridge looked the same, as always, steady and quiet. Back home, she told Sam to change, kept her jacket on, and picked up the shovel by the door. She didn't plan to dig, just needed to move. The soil by the porch was soft again. She pressed the blade down once, then again. The second strike hit something hard. Metal. A dull, flat sound came up from the ground. She brushed away the clumps, found smooth edges beneath. Not pipe, not stone. She paused, then leaned the shovel against the wall, peeled off her boots, and went in. Sam had started the rice cooker. The smell filled the kitchen. During dinner, wind moved through the trees. She only said, "We'll see how the porch holds up," and passed him the soy sauce. The ground had sunk deeper. Evelyn stepped onto the porch, mug in hand. Moss had peeled away, showing a gray circle under the soil. Lobo paced near the railing, barking once short and sharp. She crouched and brushed dirt aside. A round metal lid emerged cold under her fingertips. She tapped it. One dull echo came back. Maybe an old drain cover, she thought, though she lingered longer than she meant to. Lobo barked again. She stood, wiped her palms on her jeans. "Just an old pipe," she muttered. Saying it made it sound truer. At the table, Sam colored quietly. "Your hands are dirty," he noted. "Garden work," she said, washing them. "You eat," he nodded, chewing his pencil. "I made the sun purple today." "Good choice," she replied. The day slipped into errands. Calls to the land office went nowhere. Transfers, then a deadline. A recorded message said the office was closed for internal review. She hung up and stared at the receiver a moment before leaving for the market. Familiar faces watched her from the aisles. A woman from the post office leaned close near the soup cans. "Best not stir things up, Evelyn. Folks here don't forget." "What folks?" But the woman had already walked off, pretending to read labels. The question stayed with her. She stopped for gas before heading home. The pump stuck. She jiggled it loose. An older man in a grease-stained jacket came around the shed. "Your heart's widow, right? Place out by the hollow." She nodded. "Harlan Dow," he said. "Worked maintenance at the mine before they shut it down. Land out there was tagged restricted years ago." No one said why. He handed her a rusted business card. "If you ever hear anything under your feet, leave it be. Some things buried don't want air." It didn't sound like a warning, more like regret. She took the card to end the talk. In the truck, the name Clearwater Mining and Survey, 1993, was barely visible. By dusk, Sam lined up toy cars on the floor. She folded laundry, stacked dishes, listened to Lobo's steady breathing by the door. When she bent for a toy truck, a clang broke through the quiet metal against wood. Lobo jumped, barking. Sam froze. Was that someone? Evelyn turned off the lamp. Nothing moved. "It's just the wind," she said, quiet. Sam went back to his cars. Lobo settled again, but stayed alert. She lingered, that metallic echo still in her chest. Through the long night, whenever she closed her eyes, she saw the wet lid waiting beneath the porch. By late morning, she pulled on gloves, took the shovel, and knelt where the moss had peeled away. The plate lay bare. Her thumb found a notch, stiff but not locked. She pressed the shovel in and leaned her weight. Metal scraped, the lid lifted, and a narrow shaft appeared beneath a rusted ladder, dropping into concrete and darkness. She stayed there, staring into it, unsure what waited below. Then Sam's voice came from the kitchen. "Mom, I can't find my glue." Evelyn kicked the lid shut, pulled moss over it, and stepped back before her heartbeat slowed. Sam called again. "Try the drawer next to the sink," she said, forcing her tone steady. The image of the ladder stayed with her through the afternoon. Folding laundry, washing, windows, paying bills, none of it pushed it away. The mail brought a plain envelope, no return address. A county notice declared her property part of the new conservation zone, scheduled for clearance within 30 days. Sheriff Kent Rowan's signature sat at the bottom. She crushed the letter, then straightened it again. Calls to the office went nowhere. Redirected lines, empty tones. By dusk, Harlan Dow stood by the fence. He didn't wave. "You opened it, didn't you?" She didn't answer. "I told you not to dig. It's my land," she said. He shook his head. "Not about land. It's what's under it." He handed her a worn photograph. Men in uniform surrounded a square pit, one masked, one holding a clipboard. No tools, just the hole and their still faces. "They called it the site," Harlan said. "Containment burial depends who you ask." She pushed the photo back. "You're wasting my time." "Then ask why they want you gone now." His words trailed her back into the house. After dinner, Sam drifted asleep at the table. The rice cooker clicked softly. Evelyn reached for the radio, hoping for noise to fill the room. Static hissed, then a brief fragment. "Clearwater? Test? Delayed." She froze. The sound vanished. Lobo stirred under the table. Sam murmured. She turned the dial, but the radio was dead again. Evelyn gathered the papers, quietly stacking them one at a time, afraid to disturb the silence that had settled over the house. "Early's better than late," he said, lifting a clipboard. "Just here to sort some paperwork. Voluntary release of property, clean, simple. Saves everyone the hassle later on." She didn't take the clipboard. Sam watched from behind the doorframe, one hand gripping the hem of his t-shirt. "I'm not signing anything," she said. Rowan's mouth twitched, not quite a smirk. "Just making sure you know your options. These old homesteads, they get left out of records. Boundaries get muddy. A lot of risk when things aren't clear. Accidents happen." He glanced toward the side yard, toward the tree line. Then back to her, eyes steady. "Like that fire, remember the one at Clearwater back in 15. Never quite figured out how it started. Unstable soil, electrical faults. The whole thing went up like tinder." He leaned slightly, lowered his voice. "It's hard to recover from something like that. Would be a shame if your son grew up carrying the same story." Her throat tightened. The heat that rose behind her eyes wasn't fear, it was anger trying to push through. She held his stare. "You should leave," she said. Rowan gave a polite nod and stepped off the porch. Before leaving, he tapped twice on the column. The hollow sound lingered longer than it should have. An hour later, Evelyn stood on a stool checking beneath the eaves. A small black disc, no bigger than a bottle cap, blinked red when her finger brushed it. By the next day, the power was gone. The fuse box number looped to a recording about high call volume. The fridge died with a soft click. Her debit card froze at the store. The clerk shrugged. At the library, the director mumbled about budget shifts. Evelyn nodded and left without a word. That night, Lobo paced across the porch. Every creak carried too clearly through the house. She sat at the kitchen table laptop, open coffee cold. Clearwater, Caldwell Hollow, no results. David Hart factory fire, nothing. She began an email to Claire Dunning, the journalist who once called after the fire. "Please help me find any record," she wrote, and stopped there, the cursor blinking after "please." She didn't send it. Lobo's barking started as usual, then turned sharp. A yelp followed. Sam ran from his room, already reaching for the front door. Evelyn caught up as the porch light flickered. The ground had sunk further, mud slipping down the edges. The lid lay crooked. Sam sat near it, holding his hand. She lifted him, blood running down his wrist. At the sink, she washed the cuts shallow, curved too, even for an accident. The shape tugged at something familiar. She unwrapped the towel, staring until her chest tightened. Sam leaned against her, half asleep. She stayed still, thumb resting over the bandage, tracing its faint half-moon line. The ache spreading through her wasn't fear exactly, more like something old finding its way back. Morning came, gray and quiet. Evelyn slipped Sam's backpack on, zipped his jacket. "Stay with Mrs. Langford today," she said. He didn't ask why. When the neighbor's door shut, Evelyn crossed the damp yard. Grass soaked through her socks. The porch sagged where Lobo had slipped the night before. She took the shovel and pried the lid open. It resisted this time. A dull scrape rang as she forced it up. Flashlight in hand, she saw the narrow shaft below ladder, concrete rust. Her breath steadied, one boot then the other. The space beneath was small gray walls, close enough to brush her shoulders. A filing cabinet leaned in the corner. A desk held a rusted machine and a logbook with its spine cracked and corners curled. She wiped her palms on her jeans and opened it. Clearwater site, personnel logs. Names filled the pages. Some crossed out, others stamped with codes. Midway down one page, David Hart, status subject, relocated. Phase 2 complete. She sank to the floor without realizing it, staring until the words blurred. No tears came, only the dry weight pressing behind her ribs. The silence thickened, broken by her own pulse. Her phone buzzed. Harlan's voice came through, rough and fast. "Get out. They still track that site. It should have stayed sealed." "What is it?" she asked, but the line was dead. On the far wall, cables spilled from a rusted conduit, cut ends, others snaking toward the woods. She followed them with her eyes, then shut the notebook, tucking it under her arm. Climbing up took effort. The lid groaned as she closed it. She locked it from above, not to keep anything in, but because leaving it open felt wrong. She crossed the yard, holding the log tight. The screen door clicked behind her, though she hadn't touched it. The house was still. Then the radio lit up, no one near it. A faint hiss filled the room, not quite static, not quite a signal. Evelyn stood in the doorway watching the speaker hum like it remembered how to breathe. It stayed that way waiting. She set the logbook on the counter, tracing the torn corner with her thumb. A floorboard creaked in the hall. She didn't move, just listened. Nothing followed. Harlan wiped dirt from his hands with a red handkerchief leaning on his truck. Evelyn stood nearby, notebook clutched to her chest before finally handing it over. He turned the pages slowly, his brow tightening as he read. "This wasn't supposed to be found," he muttered. "I figured," she said. "You know what it means." He nodded once. "I know parts. Enough." She followed his truck along a back road past the edge of town, where the trees grew thinner and old fences leaned like they'd given up years ago. They parked beside a rusted gate, chained but left unlocked. Beyond it, a warehouse sagged into the earth, its tin siding buckled, the roof patched with whatever sheet metal had been lying around. At the far end, behind a half-collapsed shelf, Harlan crouched and pulled back a tarp. Used to be a junction box here. Monitoring cable from the upper line. He pointed to a thick conduit long since split open. Still lived out it. But sometimes these old wires, they hum. Evelyn bent closer. The cable ran along the wall, disappeared into a panel marked CLWR-TAC-03. Underneath, someone had scratched a symbol she recognized from the logbook. 2 interlocked rings, one broken. "What was Clearwater?" she asked. He exhaled through his nose, took a beat. "Officially a land survey operation. Privately funded, government adjacent, nobody really asked. Unofficially, it was about people. Signals. They tracked responses to controlled exposure. Stress, memory, fear, whatever they could map." She blinked. "Exposure to what?" He shook his head. "Didn't say. Some folks came back different, others didn't come back at all." Evelyn reached for her phone and hit record. Harlan didn't stop her. "They used this site," she asked, "for staging. Test subjects were tagged. Family members told they'd died in accidents. They were relocated." The word echoed something from the logbook. She swallowed. Why would anyone agree to that? Some didn't. Harlan leaned back on his heels and stared at the conduit. "Don't stay here long," he said. They sat on the back steps of the warehouse, drinking instant coffee from a thermos he kept in the truck. "Sam likes making dioramas," she said suddenly. "Miniature houses, glue everywhere." Harlan smiled, didn't reply. "He says he's building a whole town so nothing can get lost." They watched the tree line. Birds moved between branches, fast and nervous. "You scared?" he asked. She took another sip. "I'm too tired for scared." When they drove back toward the main road, a black SUV sat parked across the gravel lot. As they passed, the headlights blinked on and swept across the side mirror. No one followed. That night, she sat in the kitchen after Sam had gone to bed. Her laptop buzzed softly as she plugged in the recorder. The audio transferred without trouble. She created a new folder, labeled it clearly, then dragged the files in, just in case she saved them again on a flash drive, and ejected it. When she opened the folder to double-check, it was empty. She clicked again. Nothing. The file path still existed, but all contents had vanished. No error message, no prompt. Just blank. She leaned forward, fingers hovering above the keys. In the lower right corner of the screen, a line of text appeared in clean white font. "Access granted, Clearwater Network online." It flickered once, then remained. Evelyn stared at the message. Her hands dropped to her lap. The hum of the machine steadied into a quiet whir, and she didn't move for a long while. The phone rang before dawn. Mrs. Langford's voice cracked through the line, breathless and shaken. They came for him, Evelyn. Said they were from Child Services. Had badges and a letter. Official looked it. They said it wasn't safe for him to stay here. Evelyn was already pulling on her boots, the words chasing her out the door. The sky was barely light mist, still sitting low on the ground. When she reached the Langford's porch, the old woman stood wringing her hands. They had a car, dark one. Said they'd bring him to the county office. Evelyn's throat went dry. Did they show an ID, just the letter? I didn't think, Evelyn, they looked like law people. She didn't wait for more. By the time she reached her own yard, the gate hung open. The dog was barking from the back steps, pacing in tight circles. Papers littered the floor, school forms, tax receipts, even the birth certificate she'd kept in a folder near the sink. She moved through the mess like someone walking through a dream. The table was overturned. Sam's backpack lay empty on the couch. Sheriff Rowan stood by the patrol car, hat in hand, beside a woman she didn't recognize. Tall, dark hair, tied back, expression unreadable. The woman carried a clipboard. Evelyn Hart, the woman asked. Agent Elena Rivas, State Liaison. Sheriff Rowan's here as courtesy. Rowan nodded, his voice easy, as if this were any other visit. You've caused quite a stir. Where's my son? Evelyn said, the words coming out flat. He's being kept somewhere safe, Rivas said. For his protection and yours. We just need you to cooperate. With what the documents you removed from restricted property. The logs. I don't know what you're talking about. Rivas's eyes didn't waver. You should think carefully before lying. It makes things complicated. Rowan took a step forward. This can end cleanly, Evelyn. You give them what they need, they'll drop the rest. Everyone goes home. She stared past them at the car parked by the road. Sam's jacket was not inside. She couldn't see anything through the tinted glass. Rivas turned first. We'll be in touch. Rowan paused at the porch, his tone turning flat. Don't make this harder. You're running out of safe places. When their engines faded, Evelyn locked the crooked door and stood in the middle of the room. Lobo whined, pawing the floor. She knelt and pulled him close, her hands trembling. The dog leaned into her shoulder. Tears came fast, sharp. Not grief, something emptier. The phone buzzed. Evelyn. Harlan's voice was low, quick. They won't stop. Pack what you need. I know a place near the old mines. I'll wait by the ridge. I can't leave him. You can. Not for long. Just until we make them listen. She pressed the phone to her forehead, eyes closed. When she stood, the sky was already dark. She packed what she could reach, clothes, flashlight, the USB. The rest stayed. The house seemed smaller once the lights went out. She opened the back door. Lobo jumped into the truck. Gravel shifted under the tires as she pulled away. In the mirror, 2 dim windows glowed, then vanished. A few miles on headlights appeared behind her. They held their distance steady. She turned onto the dirt trail toward the hills. The lights followed, disappeared, then came back brighter, flooding the cab in white. She gripped the wheel harder. Lobo barked once. She pressed the gas. The truck climbed the ridge, engine echoing through the hollow. The lights stayed behind her, steady, patient, closing, but never rushing. The road turned rough gravel, giving way to ruts and stone. Evelyn gripped the wheel until her hands ached. The truck climbed the ridge, then dropped toward the mining camp, half buried in thawed snow. Lobo shifted in back, uneasy but quiet. Harlan's shack appeared among the birch's roof, patched with tin and tar. Smoke curled weakly from the crooked chimney. When she stopped the engine, he was already waiting. You drove through the creek, it was faster. Her throat felt scraped. They took Sam. His shoulders straightened. Get in! The cabin smelled of oil and dust. Maps hung on the walls marked in red. A transmitter blinked faintly beside a pile of tools. Picked up a Clearwater signal at 3, he said. Thought it was ghost till it repeated. You're sure same code I used when I worked for them? She froze. You were Clearwater. Maintenance data lines. They said it was environmental study. But what we built, watch people, not rivers. Evelyn stared ahead. You said you saw David that night. I saw him leave, Harlan said, pulling a folder from a box. He was taken out before the fire. That explosion was part of their procedure-controlled ignition, marked as containment failure. The ones they needed were already gone, so he didn't die. His name was on a relocation order. Phase 2. They called it long-term observation. She sat hard on the nearest chair. Observation for what? Recovery. Genetics. How people endure. They wanted to map instinct, maybe alter it. Evelyn pressed her palms to her face. Grief cracked, replaced by something bright and sharp. If that's true, where is he? Don't know, but the signal I caught last night means someone's still maintaining the network. Then we find it. Tomorrow, he said. Before patrols start, I'll bring the receiver and fuel. You bring proof. She pulled the USB from her pocket. The scans. He slipped it into his jacket. If we reach the tower, I can push it through an old state line. They can't erase it fast enough. Wind brushed against the siding. Neither spoke. They used him, she said quietly. They used everyone. Lobo growled. Harlan pulled the curtain back a sliver. 2 headlights waited at the clearing's edge. They tracked the signal, he muttered. You led them here. Evelyn's heart kicked. What now? We move before dawn. There's a tunnel from the quarry. It'll take us close to the ridge. She checked her pack flash drive, copy mapped Sam's scarf flashlight. Her hand lingered on the scarf. They're waiting. Or watching, he replied. The generator flickered, then died. Only the radio pulse remained steady patient. Their breathing matched its rhythm. Evelyn grabbed her coat. The tunnel swallowed their light almost at once. Evelyn followed the beam of Harlan's flashlight, her boots sinking into wet clay. Water dripped from the ceiling, steady as a clock. Stay close, he said, voice low but urgent. This passage runs under the ridge. It used to link to the old relay chamber. She adjusted the strap of her bag, feeling the USB press against her ribs through the pocket. How far? 2 miles, give or take. Long enough that we'd better not stop. Lobo padded ahead, nose close to the ground, tail stiff. Somewhere behind them, a sound echoed, a clatter of loose rock, too steady to be falling stone. Evelyn turned the flashlight, trembling in her hand. They're following us, she whispered. Harlan didn't deny it. Then we keep moving. Another sound came, a crack, distant but unmistakable. Gunfire. It ricocheted down the tunnel, faint but real. The vibration passed through her shoes, up her legs, settling in her chest. Her breath shortened. We can't outrun that. We don't have to, he said. We just can't stop. For a moment, she nearly turned back. The image of Sam, alone, unreachable, flashed through her mind. Her voice cracked before she caught it. If I call them, maybe they'll listen. Harlan grabbed her wrist, his face pale in the beam. Once they have you, the boy's no use. They'll keep him. Don't give them two. She bit her cheek until she tasted blood, forcing herself to nod. The truth left her hollow. Echoes rose behind them. Boots, a metallic voice through a speaker, Evelyn Hart. Federal enforcement. Stop immediately. The words bounced off the tunnel walls, closing in. They're bluffing, Harlan muttered. I'm already panicking, she breathed. He pulled out the map, pressed it into her hands. Side path ahead. Leads to the relay room. They used it for transmissions in '94. Send the data from there. If we split, follow it till you hit metal stairs. What about you? Someone has to slow them down. He handed her a pistol. You'll need this. I can't. You can. Aim and breathe. He turned before she could argue. The light caught the scar along his jaw. I've been running from this too long. Time I stopped. Footsteps quickened. Static and orders filled the tunnel. Go, he said. She hesitated. His look left no room for it. Evelyn tightened her grip on the gun, shoved the USB deeper into her pocket and ran. The tunnel narrowed. She crouched low. Lobo followed, claws scraping rock. Behind them came gunfire bursts, then one long echo. She didn't look back. Dust filled her throat. The slope turned upward, the air thick with rust and oil. Ahead glimmered metal, faint cold light. She reached a small landing where cables snaked along the wall. A ladder rose into shadow. Her hand clutched the rung. Hold on, Sam, she whispered and climbed. Halfway up, a final shot rang from below, then nothing. Her fingers slipped, once caught again. She kept going until her head hit a metal hatch. It gave with a groan. The ridge stretched ahead, black and steep. Engines roared somewhere below. Evelyn crouched, pistol in one hand, USB in the other. She glanced once at the tunnel mouth, hidden under rock, then turned and ran toward the faint hum of light in the distance. The climb nearly broke her. The slope was steeper than it looked, the ground soft and slick. By the ridge, her palms were raw, breath ragged. Lobo stayed close, panting through the fog. The relay tower loomed ahead, rusted steel ribs blinking in uneven rhythm. The small shed at its base leaned sideways, door half open. She stepped inside. Machinery hummed, cables twisted across the floor, a film of dust over everything. The control board still flickered green. She gripped the table's edge to steady herself. The signal was active. Her hand found the USB. She fitted into the port, watching the screen shudder awake. Lines of code crawled upward, the last pieces of what she and Harlan had carried this far. Then a voice cut through the wind. Evelyn. She froze. The name came low and steady, shaped by a drawl she knew too well. Sheriff Rowan stood in the doorway, one boot braced against the frame. Two men in tactical jackets waited behind him, rifles hanging ready. His badge caught the console's glow. You're hard to find, he said. I knew you'd come here. You always were sentimental about your husband's ghosts. Evelyn didn't turn. You shouldn't be here. I could say the same. You broke into restricted property and stole federal data. You're not just trespassing, you're inviting disaster. She faced him, hair plastered to her cheek. You burned my house. You buried my husband. What else is left to take? He smirked. You think this is revenge, it's containment. People like you don't understand the weight of what you stir up. I lost everything because of you, she said. Rowan took a step closer. You don't even know what Clearwater is. It's not about land or research, it's about order. Without it, everything falls apart. Order doesn't come from burning people alive. His eyes flicked toward her pocket. Give me the drive. You're not built for this fight. She stayed still. He moved first. The struggle was sudden, chair-falling cables snapping. He reached for her jacket. She struck his chin and shoved him off. He hit the wall, swung back, caught her temple. Pain burst through her head. She fell hard, blood warm on her face. Rowan stood over her, breathing fast. You should have stayed quiet. Through the blur, a figure formed in the doorway. Broad shoulders, familiar stance. David. Her lips shaped the name before the image dissolved into mist. Bootsteps. Another voice, calm, clipped. Sheriff. Agent Rivas stepped in, coat open, badge glinting faintly. You were told to contain, not destroy. Containment ended when she showed up, Rowan muttered. Rivas's gaze shifted from Evelyn to the console. If you send that data, you'll start something you can't stop. Truth doesn't save, it only moves the graves. Evelyn pushed herself up, one hand pressed to her forehead. Then maybe it's time to stop digging new ones. You don't know who's listening, Rivas warned. Evelyn backed toward the console. The USB light pulsed on the table. She reached for the keyboard. Rowan lunged. She grabbed a wrench and swung. He caught her arm, drove her backward into the control board. Sparks burst, lights dimmed. He tore the power cord free. The hum died. Darkness swallowed them. Boots scraped, metal clattered. Evelyn dropped to her knees, groping for the fallen USB. Rowan's voice drifted through the dark quiet now. See what happens when you chase ghosts. Her fingers met only gravel. The taste of blood thickened in her mouth. Wind pressed through the broken siding, carrying a deep, low hum from beneath the ridge. Steady, endless, like the ground itself was still trying to speak. Darkness pressed from all sides. Evelyn lay still, crawled across the gravel, hands stinging, searching for the faint pulse of the USB light. Nothing, only the dead hum of the generator. Then a radio crackled nearby. Static, then Harlan's voice. You think you can bury the truth twice? A thud followed, a grunt. Then silence. Rowan's boots scraped across the concrete. You should have stayed in your hole, old man. The radio picked up again, this time, Rivas's voice calm, clinical. Don't kill him yet. We might still need him to talk. And keep the woman alive. They want her for phase 2. Evelyn froze. The words landed with a slow, cold weight. They want her. Not gone, not silenced, used. Just like they had used David. The flashlight beam passed over her head. She pressed her body into the dirt, heartbeat hammering against the ground. The footsteps moved away toward the far end of the room. Rivas continued, quieter now, though the radio still carried it. Hart's data was promising. If the genetic markers transfer, she's the key. They'll continue what he started. A pause. Then Rowan's reply, low and rough. And if she fights back, she won't, Rivas said. She'll break when she knows the truth. Evelyn lifted her head. Something metallic glinted beneath a coil of wire. She reached out, fingers brushing cold steel. The USB. She slipped it into her sleeve and rolled beneath the console, forcing her breath to stay small. The radio clicked again, voices shifting. Rivas was closer now, speaking softly to Rowan. David Hart didn't die, she said, but he chose to stay with them. You understand, he could have walked away. Evelyn felt the world tilt. Her lungs locked. She tried to swallow, but her throat burned. The sentence repeated in her mind until it stopped meaning anything. He chose to stay. Not taken. Not trapped. Choose. Her fingers dug into the floor. Grief came, but it was dry this time. No tears left to give it shape. The ache spread outward, meeting the anger that had waited for years under her skin. Rowan barked an order. Metal clanged. She could hear Rivas pacing. She's not worth the damage, Sheriff. Extract her and end this. She's worth more alive, he answered. You said so yourself. A second later, a violent tremor shook the floor. Dust fell from the ceiling. Rowan cursed. Evelyn raised her head. Another rumble followed, deeper this time. She recognized that sound. It wasn't thunder. It came from underground. Then Harlan's voice burst through the radio again, broken but defiant. You wanted your proof, you bastards? Here it is. A flash of orange light split the dark corridor. The explosion came a breath later, louder, closer. Evelyn's body slammed against the wall. For a moment, she couldn't hear anything but ringing. Her wrists ached, the zip ties digging into her skin. She twisted, using the edge of a metal vent to saw at the plastic. Each movement burned, but she kept at it until it gave way. Her hands came free. The station door groaned as heat expanded the hinges. Fire licked along the cables. Rivas shouted something, orders drowned by the roar. Evelyn crawled through the haze, coughing. The USB was still in her grip. Lobo barked, faintly muffled but alive. She stumbled toward the doorway, following the faint rush of cold air that cut through the smoke. Behind her, Rowan yelled, "Stop her!" She didn't look back. The second explosion tore through the ridge harder than the first. The shock wave threw her forward. She hit the snow, rolled, once came up, gasping. A burst of static cracked through the radio she still carried. Harlan's voice, faint but steady. Run, Evelyn. That's what they never could do, run from their own fire. She reached the tree line, bent over, lungs burning. The ridge above her pulsed with flame. Her body shook, not from cold, not entirely from fear, but from the sharp truth that she was still alive because they needed her. That meant she finally had a weapon. Snow thickened to a steady curtain, muffling the world. Evelyn's hands were raw knuckles, split from the frost. She followed the faint line of power poles that led from the ridge, using each post to steady herself. Engines echoed behind her, flattened by the storm. Headlights swept across the fog, slow and searching. She moved faster, half sliding through frozen mud, her breath breaking into short white bursts. At the bottom, the ground leveled into a field crusted with ice. The secondary relay hut waited at the far edge, small, square, forgotten. Its door hung crooked, snow piled at the base. She pushed it open, the hinges protesting. Her hands trembled as she searched her coat. Something crinkled in the lining, a scrap of paper. She opened it with her teeth when her fingers wouldn't move right. Scrawled across the page were numbers and words smeared by oil, 157.3 wideband. Speak the truth and they'll listen. For a long moment she just stared at it. Then, with a breath that trembled into a laugh, she said quietly, "You old fool." She crossed to the transmitter, brushing frost from the dials. The machine coughed when she powered it on the speakers, hissing before finding a low hum. Needles jumped. A green light blinked once, then steadied. The USB had survived the flight. She pushed it into the port. A list of files blinked on the cracked monitor, each marked by a name, a date, a notation that sent her stomach twisting. Subject relocation complete. Her reflection flickered faintly on the screen, pale and streaked with dirt. "All right," she whispered. "You want to hear something true? Listen." She pressed the microphone switch. Static filled the air, a long drag of noise, before her voice found a path through. "My name is Evelyn Hart," she said. The words came soft, at first unsteady. "You don't know me, but you know this town, Caldwell Hollow. For years, people went missing here. My husband was one of them. They said it was an accident. It wasn't." She flipped a page in the logbook, reading each entry aloud. The list of names grew longer, her voice growing stronger. April 12th, 1993, David Hart. Phase 2 complete. September 4th, 1995, Annette Cole. Subject relocated. June 2nd, 1908, Simon Lake. Memory erasure trial. The rhythm of it built into something raw. She barely heard the pounding outside or the engines drawing closer. Her pulse matched the static hum. "There's a project," she said the words now, firm, each one pushed out through frozen lips. "Clearwater. They used our homes, our water, our families. If you hear this, tell someone. Don't let them hide again." Snow gusted in through a crack in the wall, sweeping across the floor. She shivered but didn't stop. On the monitor, the transmission bar surged, spreading the signal across every connected frequency. A red icon blinked. Emergency network linked. Somewhere far beyond the valley, a radio announcer's voice cut off mid-sentence as her broadcast overrode the feed. Then another and another. Across the county, truckers pulled over to the shoulder, confused voices crackling on CB lines. In town, old radios buzzed awake the words of a tired woman spilling into kitchens and bars and police stations. Back in the hut, Evelyn's throat burned. They took my husband. They tried to take my son. If you're hearing me, don't turn this off. Write it down. Remember the names. The generator whined under the strain. The light overhead dimmed, then brightened again. She read faster, skipping lines, her voice breaking but relentless. Project Clearwater. Phase 2 initiated May 2015. Fire used as cover event. All surviving assets contained. The doorknob rattled. She jammed the chair against it, heart pounding. Her last words came through in a whisper, for Harlan, for David, for Sam. The metal door shuddered under a heavy blow. Then came light, blinding white spilling through the cracks. Evelyn braced for Rowan's men. Instead, the sound shifted, a rising whir, thick and rhythmic. Helicopter blades. A voice thundered from above. Sheriff Rowan, step away from the building. Federal oversight inbound. The pounding stopped. She turned toward the door, breath ragged. It swung open. Rowan filled the frame coat streaked with mud gun raised. The searchlight hit him full in the face, washing them both in white. Neither moved. The roar from above swallowed everything. Evelyn couldn't tell if she'd won or only cracked something too big to close again. But she wasn't running anymore. She lifted her head into the light, eyes wide, waiting. Wind tore through the valley, dragging snow and smoke into a gray blur. Evelyn stood wrapped in a blanket someone had thrown over her shoulders, hair stiff with soot. Agents worked through the wreckage, voices sharp and quick. Secure the perimeter, get medical watch for flare-ups. Boots crunched over frozen debris. A man in a dark jacket approached. Ma'am, can you walk? She nodded, though her legs wobbled. When he took her arm, she didn't fight it. Her eyes stayed on the ruined relay hut, the roof caved in, sparks still flickering under the snow. Behind her, shouting broke through the wind. Rowan on his knees, wrists bound. His voice rasped with fury. You don't know what you're doing. This goes higher than. Two agents hauled him up. The snow darkened where his boots dragged. Riva stood nearby, coat half open, a face unreadable. An officer read her rights in a steady tone. She said nothing. The agent guiding Evelyn said softly, they'll be taken to Helena for processing. You're safe now. Safe. The word didn't sit right. It felt too round, too clean for what was left behind. She kept her gaze on the tower as they passed it. The cables swayed gently, whispering against each other like an old breath. They brought her to a van parked near the road. A medic tried to clean the cut on her forehead, but she shook her head. Later, she said. Through the open door, she could hear the distant hum of radios. Someone reported transmission confirmed. Multiple counties picked it up. News outlets already rebroadcasting. The agent who had stayed near her looked back. You did that? Evelyn didn't answer. Her hands rested in her lap, palms streaked with dirt and dried blood. Hours later, under the glare of floodlights, she sat wrapped in another blanket near the sheriff's office. Reporters gathered behind a temporary fence. Microphones pointed like bayonets. A woman's voice called out, "Is it true the missing persons files go back 30 years? Someone else shouted, "Were there children involved?" The questions blurred together, dissolving into static. She stared at the snow melting along the edges of her boots. For once, she didn't feel the cold. A young officer approached with a phone. "It's for you, from the Children's Center." Her fingers trembled when she took it. A voice came through, soft, hesitant. "Mom." Her throat closed. For a moment, she couldn't speak. "Sam, they said you were okay." "I am." She managed, though. Her voice broke halfway through. "When are you coming?" She looked toward the horizon. The ridge was just a shadow now, the fire buried under layers of fresh snow. "Soon, sweetheart. They're taking care of things here." He was quiet for a beat. "Then did they find Dad?" She shut her eyes. Her hand found the edge of the blanket and held it tight. "In a way," she said. "He came home already. Really not the way we thought," she whispered. "But yes." There was a small noise on the line, half a sigh, half relief. "I miss him, I know. Me too." The connection faded and the call ended. She kept the phone against her ear until the silence settled completely. When the agent returned, she handed it back and asked quietly, "Can I see him tomorrow?" "They're arranging transport now," he said. She nodded, then looked toward the road. Ambulances moved slowly past red lights reflecting on the snow. The valley stretched wide and pale beneath them. By morning, the headlines spread everywhere. Caldwell Hollow Scandal exposes decades-long experiment. Families of the missing demand justice. Clearwater program under federal investigation. Names from her husband's logbook scrolled across every screen, people who'd existed only as ink now spoken aloud. Families gathered outside precincts and hospitals clutching photographs, waiting for someone to explain. Evelyn stood apart, the crowd's noise dulled by exhaustion. Every cheer and shout felt distant, like sound crossing water. When the van stopped, Sam jumped out before the door opened fully. He ran straight into her arms. His jacket smelled of soap and crayons. "Mom," he whispered. "I thought you weren't coming back." "I didn't either," she said, a laugh breaking through tears. He looked up. "Are we going home?" She brushed snow from his hair. "We'll find one," she said. "A better one." Nearby reporters called questions. Someone spoke about reform, about truth. Evelyn barely listened. A medic waved her toward an ambulance and she followed hand in Sam's. At the top of the hill, she glanced back. The ridge lay quiet beneath a thin veil of smoke, every edge softened by snow. The last curl of gray rose into the sky and faded. "Mom, it's cold," Sam murmured. "I know." She squeezed his fingers. "Let's go." They walked the white road together, footprints side by side, until the snow covered them again. Quiet, steady, almost kind. 3 days later, Evelyn drove back into Caldwell Hollow. Patrol tape still fluttered along the main road. Snowmelt streamed toward the fields. The town felt hollow, like it had exhaled and forgotten to draw breath again. She parked near her house. The official seal still stretched across the doorframe. She peeled it away, slow and careful, and stepped in. Everything sat where she'd left it, the chipped mug, Sam's coat, Lobo's paw prints dried in dust. Only the stillness was new. She moved through each room, listening to the floors settle. Burnt pine lingered beneath the scent of cold ash. In the corner stood the old writing desk. She'd avoided it for years. The top drawer caught, then slid open as always. Inside lay the brass, lighter dented initials, DH, barely visible. She turned it in her hand, thumb tracing the grooves. Then she flicked it open. The spark caught. A small flame rose steady and sure. Lobo patted encircling once before settling beside her, his head resting on her knee. She let her hand fall to his fur. The warmth beneath her palm made the air around her feel softer. It struck her that the land had done what she hadn't been able to cover its wound without forgetting it existed. The lighter clicked shut. The small sound filled the whole room. She sat on the floor, her knees drawn up, the object still in her hand. Words rose without effort. "I dug all the way down, David," she murmured. "There's nothing left to find." It wasn't anger, and it wasn't grief. It was the kind of truth that made room for breath. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. What filled her chest instead was weightless, something close to release. The kind that came after too much running, when the body finally believed it could stop. Through the open doorway, Sam's footsteps pattered across the hall. "Mom, I'm here." He appeared holding a crumpled envelope, the corners brown from age. "They gave me this at the station. Said it was from the evidence box." She took it, surprised by its lightness. A faded photograph, David and Harlan much younger, standing side by side with their backs to the mine. The ridge stretched behind them, clean and untouched. David's head was turned slightly toward the camera, caught mid-laugh. Sam leaned closer. "Is that him?" "Yeah," her thumb brushed the edge of the picture. "That's him." "He looks happy," Sam said. "He was," she answered. "He just forgot how to stay that way." The boy nodded, not really understanding, but sensing it was enough. He placed his small hand over hers. "Can we go home now?" "We're already home," she said softly. They stayed like that for a while, the photograph resting between their palms. Lobo's stretched tail thumping once, before stilling again. Evelyn took in the room, the cracked, clock-worn floorboards, window, fogged by their breath. Everything broken seemed gentler now, as if the house had waited for her forgiveness, not her return. She slid the photo back into its envelope, tucked it with the lighter into her coat. Small things, heavy in meaning. Sam's laughter rang as he opened the door for Lobo. The dog bounded through melting ice tail, sweeping puddles. Evelyn stood at the threshold, watching the thin snow give way to new grass. The wind moved through the trees, quiet, unthreatening. From behind, Sam called, "Mom, can we light the stove tonight?" Like before, she smiled, adjusting her scarf. "Sure," she said. "Let's do that." A month later, the town gathered again. The community hall gleamed polished and bright where dust once lingered. Evelyn sat near the back, hand still in her lap. She hadn't come to be seen. Sam sat beside her, swinging his legs, tracing circles on her palm. At the front, a line of state officials faced the crowd beneath a banner. Public hearing on the Caldwell Hollow investigation. The lead agent, a tall woman with cropped hair, adjusted the microphone. "Thank you for coming," she began. "After reviewing 3 decades of sealed documents and interviewing surviving witnesses, we've confirmed that multiple crimes were committed under the Clearwater Project. Former Sheriff Kent Rowan and Agent Elena Rivas have been charged with conspiracy, unlawful detention, and human rights violations. They'll face trial in federal court this summer." Murmurs rippled through the room: anger, disbelief, weary relief. Evelyn sat still, letting the words settle without clinging to any of them. The investigation also confirmed, the agent went on, that several of the missing persons from Caldwell Hollow were part of unauthorized testing and record falsification. While not all remains have been recovered, identities are being restored. Families will receive official recognition through the State Memorial Act passed last week. A slide was projected onto the wall behind her, a list of names. The hall fell silent. People rose from their seats, whispering, pointing. Some covered their mouths. Near the bottom of the list, Evelyn saw the name Harlan Dow. Next to it, a single word: deceased, witness. Her throat tightened. She didn't cry, just sat back. The agent cleared her throat again. Mr. Dow's information was vital in exposing the operation. His cooperation allowed the recovery of the Clearwater archive and the safe release of confidential evidence. The department will honor him posthumously. Applause began hesitantly, then spread across the hall. Evelyn didn't join it, but her fingers brushed against the small envelope in her coat, the one holding the photo of Harlan and David. When the meeting ended, the crowd filtered out in slow waves. Conversations overlapped, soft apologies, bits of gratitude, tears mixed with disbelief. On her way to the door, Evelyn felt a hand brush her sleeve. It was Mrs. Geller, the woman who once told her not to stir up old things. Her voice trembled. "Thank you," she said. "My daughter finally got her father's name back. We didn't even know where to start until you spoke up." Evelyn met her eyes for the first time in years. "You would have done the same," she said, though she wasn't sure either of them believed it. Across the street, workers stood by the old mining sign. The letters Clearwater Mining Co. had been pried loose, stacked in a heap of rust and splinters. In its place, a new wooden board gleamed in fresh paint. Caldwell Memorial Park. Evelyn stopped. The name looked strange and beautiful, like a wound turned into a scar. She stood there until the workers moved away. Sam tugged her hand. "Mom, can we walk through the park?" "It's still wet," she said, but followed anyway. The soil squished under their boots. Lobo darted ahead, nose to the ground, tail wagging, as if the world had finally given him permission to run. Sam picked up a small stone and slipped it into his pocket. "I'll plant it tomorrow," he said. "Right here, so it grows into something." Evelyn smiled, brushing snow from his shoulder. "What kind of something?" "A tree," he said without hesitation. "One that doesn't burn." She crouched to tie Sam's shoelace, careful not to pull too tight. "Then we'll find a good place for it," she said. The sun slipped behind the ridge, the snow glowing gold before fading to gray. A soft wind carried the scent of wet earth and pine, familiar, lighter now. Sam ran ahead, calling for Lobo. The dog bounded through the thaw, scattering bits of ice. Evelyn lingered on the path, the quiet widening around her. Beyond the park, the old radio tower stood still, its wires slack. The town no longer felt haunted. It simply lived ordinary and unfinished. She drew her coat closer and followed the path toward her son, her steps blending with his laughter and the sound of softening ground. By spring, Caldwell Hollow no longer looked like a wound. Snowmelt streaked the hills in green, and the river behind the school ran full again. Children's voices carried through the valley like birdsong, returning after a long winter. Evelyn walked the creek path, her boots damp with mud. The conservation group had set up tables of saplings and shovels. Sam ran to pick one, holding it up like treasure. "This one, Mom, it's going to be tall." She knelt to help him settle the roots. Then we'll give it good ground. Neighbors worked nearby, some she knew, others she didn't. No one spoke of the past. The quiet between them felt shared, almost kind. When the sapling stood firm, Sam pressed his handprint into the soil. Evelyn placed a small plaque beside it, Clearwater Grove, in memory of those who never made it home. Wind rippled through the valley, bending the young trees, carrying the scent of grass. She looked around. Houses once abandoned were painted new. The old store had reopened. The mine road was now a walking trail lined with benches. The town finally seemed to belong to its people again. Sam brushed dirt from his palms. "Do you think they know we planted this for them?" "I think they do," she said. "The ground remembers." He grinned and ran toward the stream, Lobo bounding after him. By evening, the valley stilled. Evelyn loaded the tools into the truck, her muscles pleasantly sore, the kind of tired that comes from rebuilding, not surviving. At home, Sam talked about trees until he drifted to sleep. Evelyn stayed in the kitchen. She turned the old radio's dial out of habit. Static gave way to a man's warm voice, whether a fishing report, then a country song. She leaned against the counter, smiling faintly. For months, the radio's whispers had been a warning. Now it was only sound. Ordinary welcome. Later, she stepped onto the porch with a mug of tea. The new boards under her feet felt solid, like something made to last. Sam circled the yard on his bike, his laughter rolling with the wind. "Watch this, Mom," he called, wobbling as he turned. "I'm watching," she said, though her gaze had already drifted toward the forest. The trees moved gently, their branches rustling in a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. The sound no longer reminded her of loss. It felt like the earth exhaling, like something vast and kind, breathing her name. Lobo settled beside her, his fur warm against her leg. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the brass lighter. The initials still gleamed faintly where her thumb had rubbed them clean. She flicked it open. A flame bloomed, small, steady, golden. She held it up for a moment, not as a symbol, not as a farewell, but as proof of something that had survived the burn. The flame wavered once before she snapped it closed. The click was soft but final in the best way. Sam called, "Mom, can we keep the light on tonight?" "Sure," she answered, her voice easy. "All night if you want." He cheered and disappeared into the house. Evelyn stayed where she was, looking out over the hills. The last of the snow caught the dying sun glowing faintly before surrendering to dusk. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a breeze lifted, carrying the faint hum of spring peepers near the water. The sound mingled with Sam's laughter in the creak of the porch boards beneath her bare feet. She closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of thawing soil and pine. The moment stretched quietly, unmeasured, like time itself had paused to give her room to exist. In the end, Evelyn didn't win by uncovering secrets. She won by refusing to live afraid of them. Caldwell Hollow healed not because justice was served, but because truth was spoken aloud even when no one wanted to hear it. Sometimes survival isn't about escaping the darkness, but about planting something that grows from it. May we all learn to face what's buried and let it bloom into light.